Welcome to the Nametags Chat podcast. Today, I am joined by Lisa Franks, who is famous for 6 gold medals in the Paralympics and 1 silver medal. She also is a phenomenal adventurer. We're going to get into the adventure part, which to me is just amazing. I did not know that she had named her Honda Odyssey, not Odyssey, but Element, right? Honda Element, Marty. But also, she's from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. So Moose Jaw. How cool is it when you tell people you're from Moose Jaw? I mean, that might be one of the coolest names of a town. And do they take you seriously or not?
A lot of people have heard of it, but have no idea where it's from. But it's just a very memorable name, and there's always connections. So yeah, I take great pride in saying I'm from Moose Jaw, and always hearing about all the different people that know about it.
It is. So we were just talking, and I have to come clean because I posted that I knew you from Atlanta, but I didn't actually know you from Atlanta. I knew you from Sydney, where you were 17 years old in Sydney and took the place by storm in 2000 in Australia. I mean, breaking world records, winning races, winning the 400 by 11 seconds? Is that what you won the 400 by?
That was in Athens in 2004. Actually,
Oh, that was Athens.
yeah, the races in Australia were really, really close. It was my coming out party, I guess, my first big international meet, and nobody knew who I was, and I think I caught a lot of people by surprise.
How did that feel to be? Because you said you were watching the Atlanta Paralympics from the hospital, and a lot of people have said this same kind of thing. Did you want to see the Paralympics when you're in the hospital, or were you like, I don't want to be a part of that whole thing. Don't show it to me.
Well, when I was in the hospital shortly after starting rehab, I had met Paralympians. So I'd met Clayton Garine, I had met Daryl Stubble, a couple of rugby players with Team Canada. So they had come to me, I had met them and didn't really know what the Paralympics were about, hadn't ever heard of them before. But all of a sudden now I had that hook. I was like, I know people that are going to be there. And so, of course, I was just tuned in, trying to get any snippet I could of what was going on in Atlanta. And yeah, it caught me, and I said, well, I'd love to be there someday. And I didn't think it would only take 4 years, but yeah, Clayton actually became my coach, and in track, he became my coach the next year, and we made it happen very, very quickly. It worked because Clayton's wife was my physiotherapist, just a stroke of luck. And she knew as a young kid, very athletic, very into sports. And she said right away, oh, my husband, he's an athlete. He travels all over the world. And so I was expecting this big, muscular guy. And he came in and visited me. And for those that know Clay, he's kind of just like a scrawny, well, he's strong, but it's not what I had pictured in my mind at all when I pictured, a world champion wheelchair racer. He was just a colorful character, and he wheeled into my hospital room and kind of just showed me life. And it started out just evolving from learning how to do a curb in a wheelchair to traveling all over the world with wheelchair sports.
So much of the basis of this chat is from our school presentations. So with One Revolution, we do a program called Name Tags, and we're basing it on our what we call our 4 S's of resilience. And they're questions we can ask ourselves when things get difficult. And the first one I think fits you is the idea of, am I a victim or am I a survivor? It's a question about self. The second one's about situation. Is it overwhelming or a challenge? Support alone or part of a team? And then do we have one strategy or many? And for you, it seems like you've encapsulated all of these, and you went so quickly in the beginning from that potential victim to being a survivor, but also to having this support. And you got so lucky with Clayton's wife being your physio. I mean, he had to be, almost universally. I mean, there's a consensus that he was probably one of the nicest guys in the Paralympics. I don't think anybody had a bad thing to say about Clayton.
No, he was just so accepting and so helpful and just entertaining, and he just like the warmth radiated from him. And I agree with you. I don't think anybody could say anything negative about the guy.
But for you, it was a shock though, right? I mean, you ended up in the hospital, you sort of woke up and you could walk, and then you couldn't walk, and then you lost the feeling in your hands and your arms, and didn't know where it was going to go, I would imagine. I mean, what was that thought process like? Because you're not prepared for it, are you?
No, I was walking around. It was Easter break back home, and I was snowmobiling and just felt a little bit off that week. I went to bed and woke up at 3 in the morning, and I couldn't get out of bed. Like I couldn't stand up to get out of bed. And so I was then taken to the hospital, and it seemed like hours and hours until I was diagnosed, and it just progressed. So I couldn't walk, and then paralysis started moving up my body, up into my abdomen, and eventually my arms couldn't move. And so by the time I was diagnosed, I was in complete shock. I was feverish, had no movement other than a little shrug of the shoulder, and they just basically had to rush me into an emergency surgery as soon as the diagnosis came through. So what I had was called an arteriovenous malformation, and it was just a cluster of blood vessels that had not formed properly from birth, and it was in my spinal cord, and they burst and were just causing damage to the nerves in the spinal cord. And so it was really, really important to get them to get in there and to stop that bleeding and remove the pressure, because the next thing to go would be my respiratory system. And when I did have the surgery, I came out, I was on a ventilator, just paralyzed and just, yeah, in shock, wondering what direction life was going to go from that moment on.
How do you, so you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, do you start screaming for your parents or whatever? Like, I can't get out of bed. Like, how did they know?
I was so unbelievably calm somehow. I was in the basement, and they were at a bedroom in the basement, and they were on the top floor of the house. So I crawled from the basement up to the main floor, and that was just a lot of work because I didn't have any upper body strength at that point. And then I kind of just passed out. I remember on the kitchen floor, and my brother luckily had come home from a night shift from work and found me and called my parents. So I didn't have to go the second level. But I don't know how, as a 14-year-old, I look back and I think, how did I remain so calm and didn't overreact at all in that situation?
Because it would be so easy to overreact. Did you kind of think that you were in a dream or something? I mean, it seems so far-fetched. Like, is this real? I'm climbing up the stairs. Is it not real?
A little bit, and I think probably some of that strange thing going on in the body, when you're facing trauma was going on, where I was just reacting and not thinking too strangely. I just had that adrenaline and said, "Oh, I need to get help somehow and get up the stairs."
Wow. And then in the hospital, and then did you get into sports pretty much right out of the hospital?
Once, I mean, I was in a lot of pain throughout the hospital, just having surgery and everything. But I remember a few months into rehab, and they actually had quad rugby practices at the hospital. And I was thrown in a chair and just told to go at it. So here I am, 14. I was maybe 90 pounds soaking wet and playing with these grown adult men, and some of them were with Team Canada. And they were very, very welcoming, and somehow, it ignited this idea of, okay, I can still do sport. I'm going to be okay.
Okay, now you have to explain what quad rugby is for people, because some people might have seen it, some people might not have. And 90 pounds, you're at a gigantic disadvantage. I don't think you were as fast then, probably, as you became. So you might have been a good target. Okay, can you describe what quad rugby is?
I don't even know how to. So quad rugby is played in a gymnasium, and I would say it's almost a mixture between football and another sport, really. Hockey, maybe, I don't know, but it's full contact. Four people are in a chair, and these chairs are built for destruction. They have big bumpers on them, and you play with a volleyball. The object is to get the volleyball across the goal line. And the problem with me was being 90 pounds soaking wet. There's this little rule that when you're on defense, it's kind of like you line up against the goal line and people can't get past you. But if you go over that goal line, it's a point for the other team. So they quickly figured out that all they had to do was line up from half court, get a run at it, hit me in my chair, and I would just go sliding over the goal line, and it was a point for them. So it wasn't a natural thing. It probably wasn't, the best sport for me, but just being in that sort of rough and tough environment was great for me. I was a tomboy growing up. I had 3 older brothers, and so it was just natural for me to be in that environment and feeling that sort of rough and tumble environment in sport again. But yeah.
Also, I mean, you're not completely stable. I mean, I guess for you, it was not a spinal cord injury, so you didn't have you weren't missing the stability of your spine. You were clearing up blood clots, so there wasn't that ability. Like, you weren't healing bone while you're in the hospital, so you weren't in jeopardy of doing more damage.
My spinal cord was somewhat glued back together, but right, there wasn't any fracture or any sort of hardware in my neck that we had to be worried about. But I was very, very, very weak. I remember I couldn't even wheel up a ramp at that time, and here I was just getting pummeled by grown men in wheelchair rugby.
What was their response to you?
I think they welcomed me, and I remember them commenting on how I had such good ball handling skills for somebody who was just so new to the wheelchair. And they even commented that I had good fitness. Like, I was very, very fit going into it. And so a few months in the wheelchair, and I was keeping up and wheeling all right, wheeling circles around them a bit in a way. So yeah, they were very, very accepting and just welcomed me. And, within a year, I was traveling to nationals with them, and they were sneaking me into the bar. And just, I don't know
Within
what my
a year,
parents
so
were
you were
thinking.
15.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the drinking age in Moose Jaw?
It would have been 19, but we'd go to Alberta, which was the province over, and it was only 18 there, so we weren't breaking the law too terribly.
That is awesome. So quad rugby was your first sport
It was.
when did you get into racing? Because you met Clayton, who, just to back up, Clayton in a lot of ways for the quadriplegics, for the what was a T52, the track classification, was the man for a long time, both on the, especially the longer distances like 5K, 10K, the marathon. Like, he was the guy who established the standard and was the person everybody was chasing. So you went to the top, you went to the guy, but I don't think you didn't adopt all of his tactics. I don't think. Somebody recently on Facebook showed Clayton it was an old, I think John Burr had an old ad of Clayton at, like a top end ad. And it was just this perfectly beautiful chair and everything. And somebody commented, well, within 5 minutes, that's going to be covered in clister. And I mean, which with quadriplegics, the contact can be a little bit more challenging. And Clayton was famous for having this handball clister, which is like pine sap effectively, that he always had on his gloves, on his chair, on everything. You stayed pretty clean though, didn't you?
I don't think you knew me well enough. I would try to cover it, but I didn't know any better because Clayton was my role model and I just saw him covered in clister. But people also noted that we also had the same crooked helmet. They always said we can tell who coaches Lisa because we got the same crooked helmet and we kind of stick crooked in our wheelchair from scoliosis. But yeah, we were actually pretty similar in a lot of ways.
Well, and you were equally fast. So when did he start coaching you?
So I met him in the hospital, and I think so my injury was in April, and it was that fall, I want to say, that I tried pushing in my first racing chair. I went out to, he lived a little over an hour away from me, and we went to his place. I tried it. I hated it. I said I'd never ever do this sport, and
Why
that was
did you
that.
hate it?
It was a technique. It was a technique because we had racing gloves on. You're pushing with the back of your hand. It just didn't come naturally, and then you had to lift the front end to steer it, and I was terrible at it. Just absolutely awful. And then,
Going straight, the crown of the road. I remember that even when I got into my first racing chair, just kind of going, and you're like, okay, I'm trying to go. But then the road is, there's a crown in the road, and I could never quite get going straight. It seemed like it lasted forever. So yeah.
well, I'm from the prairies. Our roads are pretty flat and straight, but didn't remember that. But I just remembered so much work also getting into the wheelchair. You had to spandex on. Who would want to do this? I couldn't fathom.
And then when did it happen?
I don't know how he managed. I think I was just looking for something to do because we had gone through that winter without really doing anything. And then early in spring, I think I said, I want to try it again. And I did. He sold me one of his old racing chairs, and it was something that I could do. I could get home from school, I could go right from my house and just wheel along the streets. And so I would do that after school, and it's what gave me sort of a sense of normalcy back into my life. And then within a few months, I was invited to a Canada Games tryout, which is a big multi-sport event with all across athletes, young athletes all across Canada. And that was kind of my first breakthrough.
Really? The first games you went to was kind of your first breakthrough.
Yeah. I was seeing other athletes in wheelchairs. We had a contingency from Saskatchewan of a few different athletes. And I didn't do very well. I think I got lapped in the 800 meter, but
Which is two laps. So that's a
yeah,
challenge. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it was just, it gave me so much to strive for because there were athletes there that were striving for Team Canada, and I could see so much potential with it.
Was that so different than what you saw in the hospital? I mean, you saw a little bit more in that you were playing quad rugby and those kinds of things, but the sense of possibility, was it more than you'd imagined it would be when you saw people who were really good?
I just seen those athletes in person. I didn't know how I would ever get to that level. That just I couldn't fathom from where I was at being lapped to getting to the point that the athletes that were at the top of the podium were at. So that for me was just to have that up close and personal was what left me kind of gobsmacked was, well, how do I do this? And luckily I had great mentors that showed me how.
Yeah, it's my first nationals were 1992. And it was the trials, it was the nationals, and it was the trials for Barcelona. So all the big guys were there. I was like, I ended up as the novice of the year at that race. I actually got a plaque that was like, which is one of those sort of like backhanded plaque kind of things. Like, here's your award. You're the best of the people who don't know what's going on.
Gotta start somewhere though, right?
I don't know where it is. I need to go track it down. But it was really cool in a way because on the track it's so different than road racing. Because the road racing you don't really see the race, where track I was able to sit there and I was able to watch the race and see the tactics and the technique of drafting behind somebody so that you could stay out of the wind and save energy, and then seeing the sprint at the finish, and I was like, wow, like this is super exciting. And that's what got me really is watching that. And it sounds like it was a similar kind of deal to you, but it's a community, isn't it? I mean, you get in that community with people who've been around for a long time. And how did that change the way that you looked at sort of like your everyday life?
For me, for me, yeah, it was probably more about the community and the acceptance of my disability at that point. yes, I love being out and wheeling and active, but seeing other people that had gone through similar things and adjusted really well in their life, that's what really got me hooked. And I could, at that point, I wasn't even independent. My mom had been a nurse, and so I got to leave the hospital early before I was even really ready to. And so traveling to my first Canada Games, she kind of came and she would help me do some of the self-care. So then I get there and there's other people that don't have that and they're completely independent. And I was so embarrassed by it. That was a huge motivator for me, was just to get so I could travel on my own without any help. And so all those things of seeing other people, trying to get independent, and then trying to improve my racing skills just really was a whole package. And from then on, it was just no turning back.
Did you gain any heroes at that first event?
Did I gain any heroes? There were some coaches actually that really stood out to me just because they, I think it was a learning experience for them to have somebody so new with an injury. And then it was a learning experience for me to try to, do I accept help? Don't I accept help? It was just always this juggling act. And then we kind of bonded through that. It's like a balance of what do you do? Do you help each other or not? And so I think as we maneuvered through that, some of the coaches I really gained a lot of respect for and kept in contact throughout the years with them.
When you so you progressed quickly. I mean, this is 1 year out, but it's also 3 years to Sydney. and and you went from the hospital, the newbie, the mom as your nurse at your first event, to, did you know going into Sydney that you had a chance to be as dominant as you were, or a chance to be on the podium, or what did you think going into Sydney?
I had zero expectations going in. I had done a few international meets. I had gone to the big metro track meet in Toronto that we always hosted. I'd been there twice, and we did a summer down under series in Australia about the year before. But it was one of those things where the top people weren't really going to those. So there were these names that I heard of but had never seen in person. And so I didn't know how I stacked up against them. And they had never heard of me. So it wasn't until just the starting line at the first race where I was looking around. I was like, oh, okay, these are the names, these are the people I've heard about. Let's see how all of this goes. And I think my first race was the 1500 meter, which was probably one of my stronger ones. And it was close. It came down really to two of us. And luckily, I ended up, spoiler alert, I ended up on the top of the podium in that one.
Where was it like the last 200 meters? Was it the last 100 meters? Where did
It
you
was
pull out?
last 100. Yeah, I think I just passed around the corner and had maybe half a chair length and just managed to hold off the last push.
That's awesome. So what did when you got there, you got your first event, you got your 1500 under, and then you went from winning the 1500 to winning again and again and again. How did they look at you? Because the thing is, Sydney was in October. So were you still in high school? Were you taking time off of high school to compete in Sydney?
No, I graduated the year that spring, and so I actually moved in September to university. I was there for 2 weeks, met my professors in engineering, and said, "Okay, I'm going to be gone for the next 6 weeks. Catch you in 6 weeks." And they sent me with textbooks and homework, and I really didn't do anything, and I was just focused on racing in Sydney and somehow managed to survive the semester. I still don't know.
Really, because engineering is one of those weed out majors where right in the beginning everybody wants to be an engineer, and then there are a lot fewer at the end of the semester. So you took 6 weeks off and still managed to survive.
Yeah, that's basically the conversation. Like one of my first classes, they said, look to your left, look to your right. By December, only one of you will be left out of the three of you. And that's when I raised my hand. I said, okay, well, can I take 6 weeks off? But they managed to, I think I did drop down to just 3 of the 5 classes. I picked up the other ones later in the summer, but they were very understanding. We'll just say that. Yeah.
That is that is absolutely amazing. So engineering, and you weren't doing any studying when you're in Sydney.
No, I think I pretended to, or I'd crack the book, but then, oh, you're in an athletes village with thousands of athletes, and there's just too much excitement going on.
There's nobody, yeah, nobody's super helpful in the village. Wow. Wow. So, and then 4 years later, you're in Athens. So did you graduated on time? You did your 4 years or no?
I actually took that year off because I had qualified for some funding and they had helped me. So I took from January of 2004 off from school, and I actually went down to Australia and I trained through the winter in Australia there. And that was just remarkable for my training. I went from, I think I probably took about 6 seconds off my 400-meter PB in that time frame. So it was just outstanding just to be able to focus. That was the first time I was just able to focus on one thing, and that was just track.
How was it focusing on one thing? Was it good, or are you one of those people who needs to sort of be distracted in some ways from that one
Oh,
thing?
it was great for me. It was, well, first of all, I was escaping the Saskatchewan winter, which was, I was not complaining about that one bit, but it was great. Just, I was staying at a training center with another Canadian athletes. We were surrounded by triathletes mostly and rugby players. And it was just, that's probably when I thrive the most, is when I can just not have anything else to worry about. You just have sole focus on what's going to be happening in 8 months' time. And I just came out strongest and fittest I'd ever been, and confident in the work that I had done throughout that season.
So you were successful in Athens again. Do you miss, I mean, just in talking about your time in Australia, do you miss the lifestyle of being an athlete, like the lifestyle that you had that year?
Yes and no. It, I've been able to now focus on different things. So I'm trying a lot of different things that I didn't have the time, or I didn't want to get injured, or do that. So it's been fun discovering all these other interests I have since then. But at the same time, that if I had an opportunity to just go and do something and put all my focus on, and just strive for be the best at something again, I would definitely do that again. I just wouldn't know what in, because racing is those racing days are long gone, I would say.
But that was pretty much it, right? Did you just pretty much end after Athens in 2004? Did you continue like some
Um,
road races and things like that afterwards, or?
I I did one more season, but I had actually wasn't motivated to train in track. So I did a complete switch, and I said I want to go for Team Canada in wheelchair basketball. And so after Athens, I did a couple of marathons that fall. I came home, and then I still had a few months off from school. I packed my bags and I went to Edmonton and stayed with some Canadian wheelchair basketball players, and I just trained with them. And just that was my next focus, was to play wheelchair basketball with Team Canada.
Which is one, a bold move to decide that you're going to do something entirely different, but it's even just a little bit bolder in that there really aren't many quadriplegics who are playing wheelchair basketball, right? Wheelchair basketball is mostly paraplegics, but even more so than that, right? Even more so in that they're amputees, they're people who are effectively able-bodied, who have blown out their knee or done something like that. So they have an injury that prevents them from playing basketball standing up. But it's probably the sport, it's probably like the Paralympic sport that has the most able group of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you decide that that's the direction that you're going to go, where there really aren't any peers, there aren't anybody. Like, how I think a lot of people have a difficult time deciding that they want to do something different, but then that they want to do something different that they're not necessarily uniquely suited to, and that they might not, where they might not succeed. How were you able to make that kind of a decision, and also go from like being on the top of the world to saying, no, I'm going to try this, and it's something entirely different, and I could just sit on the bench the whole time if I make the team?
Yeah. The thing is, I had loved basketball as a kid growing up, able-bodied. I would pretend I was Michael Jordan. That was my sport. And then when I was injured, initially I said I want to play wheelchair basketball, but I was so weak. I couldn't even pick the ball. I couldn't lean over and pick the ball up from the floor. So it kind of, the idea of playing wheelchair basketball was put on the back burner. But then eventually, about 2 or 3 years after my injury, I did start playing it just for fun, just with our provincial team recreationally. And I liked it. I wasn't strong at it by any means, just because I was at the very bottom of the classification scale. But
Which means that you're picking people, right? That they're like, Lisa, go out there and get in the way, and we will run people into you, and then somebody will get open to take a shot. This is, you're an obstacle, you're a cone.
yeah, yeah, I don't even think I got on a score sheet and scored a basketball or scored a basket until my second or third season, something like that. It took me at least 2 seasons to be able to shoot a regular shot, not like a shot put, one-handed hook at the hoop. But I had played, yeah, so all throughout, the 6 years or so that I was racing, I'd also played basketball for fun. And when Athens happened and I just was not motivated to train anymore, I wanted to be challenged. And so it was just a natural transition, really. I had some of the Team Canada girls that I knew through the sport just in my ear saying, oh, there's going to be some people retiring. Maybe you want to give the sport more full-time attention and stuff like that. And what I loved about it is that in racing, in the T52 class, I was probably sort of at the top. I had a bit more strength than a lot of people out there, I'll admit that. And then all of a sudden, to go to wheelchair basketball, I was at the very bottom of the totem pole. Like, even within what is a class 1, I was probably one or two quadriplegics in the world that had played at an international level at that point. So that was a huge, like, I just love to be challenged, and to make up for that physical strength, I had to really use a lot of my intellectual skills and just try to adapt that way, because I wasn't going to go score 20 points a game. I just had to really just learn how to use, your tactics and your mental skills to try to hang with people that had more function than I had.
And your mental skills are math and physics, right?
Yeah,
Electrical engineer, is that what it?
mechanical. Yeah,
Mechanical engineer, sorry. Mechanical engineer. So math and physics. So are you sitting there? Are you working out the equations as you're on the court, or how's that working?
not necessarily equations, but definitely angles of, okay, if I cut off this person at this angle, they're out of the play. And even sort of the timing of it really works itself into, because it's like, okay, I can keep somebody out of the play for this long, but then how much time do I have to get back into the play? And it actually does really relate in a lot of problem solving in many ways that are engineering related.
Right. I would imagine. I mean, I'd imagine. I mean, it sounded like the question was in jest, but at the same time, I think that that breaking up the court and figuring out how you can use your skills, or at least your mind, to put yourself in the right position. You were one of the fastest T52s in the world, and oftentimes in history, right? I mean, I think there, do you still have any records, any world records?
I don't believe I
No.
do. No, actually, a lot of them were broken by fellow Canadian Michelle Stillwell. So, hey, at least, well, at least it's still in the country.
Still in the country, sharing the wealth. Were you fast on the basketball court?
No, I I would say I was probably fast for my disability level, but at the same time, there were only a handful of us out there with that disability. So I
Right.
definitely had to make up for it in a lot of different ways.
You had to be far more strategic, which is, do you value that more in some ways? So like as a T52, in some ways you were stronger than a lot of your competitors. I mean, that's, sport is never a level playing field, right? And Paralympic sport is even that much worse in some ways, in that you have classification, and so you can be at the top of the classification, the functional classification, you can be at the bottom of the functional classification, and you still have to find a way to compete within there. Did Is one more gratifying than the other for you, one sport?
For me, yeah, make overcoming those things where you lack, I think was more, I felt more gratifying, just because you have to be creative and you have to just use what you have in a different way. And that really excited me to be able to find a way that I could, do an underhanded scoop layup when I can't even balance without holding on to the chair somehow.
Right. Yeah. And basketball. And the funny thing about a layup, like as an able-bodied person, the layup is really probably the easiest of the shots.
Mhm.
Whereas as a wheelchair basketball player, the layup seems like it should be easy because you're closer. But as you're moving at speed, this little shot from close to the basket can be the most challenging and the most embarrassing as well, where it's like, oh, it should be really easy. And all of a sudden the ball is like at half court because you've just spiked it off of the backboard and couldn't qualify. This is probably where your physics come into play. We're trying to figure out how to actually have it soft up against the backboard. But there's so many other parts of it, right? I mean, it's your lower, trying to shoot from a lower position. When you started playing basketball, what was your hope? Did you hope to get onto the national team, and did you get onto the national team?
So I started in '99 and then was just playing for fun. After Athens 2004 is when I said, okay, I want to give this all my attention and I want to try to make Team Canada. And so in 2005, I didn't make it. I made the alternate team, so I was a development athlete. And then 2006, I had an injury at tryouts, but they had already seen enough of me throughout the season and the first half of tryouts. And luckily, I made the team in 2006 with Team Canada, and we went to I guess my first World Championships, and we came away with gold that year. So it was just, I was literally on top of the world that year. It's amazing.
And then did you compete in Beijing in basketball? You
I
did.
did, yeah, yeah. That was a rough year. I had had a shoulder injury all that basically from January until September, I guess, whenever the Paralympics were. So I was still progressing as an athlete, but then I had an injury that was holding me back a little bit. But
Wow.
it was a very different thing to be at a games in a team sport. I really enjoyed having teammates, and just it was a whole different traveling experience. And there's 12 other or 11 other athletes and a whole whack of coaches and managers and team support staff.
So victory is really a shared victory at that point, whereas I mean, you're part of a team on the track as well, but it's still an individual sport. You can win a medal for the overall medal content or medal count, but what happened with the engineering degree? I mean,
Yeah,
we hear a lot about sports. Were you working as an engineer as well?
I did. Yeah, in 2006, I came back from Worlds and I graduated that year, and then I got a job and went right into the workforce. I worked, well, I still technically work for a consulting firm, and we work in commercial building design. So with my mechanical degree, I am responsible for things like designing HVAC or plumbing, fire protection systems, things like that. But with COVID right now, I'm temporarily laid off, but hopefully we'll get some work picking up here again shortly.
How are you able, because you challenges have been a big part of what you've done. And following you on Facebook, anybody who wants to follow Lisa on Facebook should follow Lisa on Facebook because it's always interesting. You're always up to something cool. And you and your father adapted your car so that you could put a bed in your car and you pretty much decide, that's it, I'm going. And you're going for a month or more when you go on these trips.
Um, the longest, so in actually last year, Christmas time, I left and it was supposed to be for 4 months. And it got cut short because of COVID, but I did almost 3 full months of car camping. And basically, yeah, it's just a little Honda Element SUV, and I've got a plywood bed in the back, and then all the storage underneath that. I've got a cooler, I've got camping kitchen stuff and clothes and lots of sporting equipment. And so basically, I spent 3 months this past winter down driving from Saskatchewan all the way down, and I drove through Washington, Oregon, and then all the way down to California along the coast, and kind of made San Diego area my home base. And then I just got the travel bug, and then I just finished about a 6 week road trip now. I just got home this week. So it's just been amazing to be able to have your home like wherever you park it. You don't have to worry about accessibility. You just pull into a spot and that's your home for the night. It's very, very liberating in many, many ways.
What made you decide to do this though? Because I mean, a lot of people would look at it and go, okay, so you're a single woman in your car, driving all over the place, sleeping in various campsites and driveways and beaches and wherever, all over. You happen to be a quadriplegic as well, so a lot of people would look at it and go, is there something wrong with her? Do we need to talk to her parents? Is it time for an intervention? What do we need to do? Why did you decide you wanted to do this? And what was the reaction from the people around you when you said, see you later, I'm going for 4 months?
I was just trying to get away from winter again. It can be so long and cold in Saskatchewan. And I'm at my very best, but I'm outside enjoying nature and physically active. So I said, well, how can I do that? How can I combine those things? And it's just like I love camping, and it's so much work to set up a tent. So having the vehicle where you just pull in just made sense to me. But I just love adventure. I mean, being with Team Canada for so many years, and I was always balancing athletics and work, or athletics and school. And so now I have this time to explore different things and to try different things. And so that was what motivated me, was to just hit the open road. And I really didn't have any fears. I know people were saying, you're a female on your own with a disability. What, aren't you scared? Aren't you worried? And I didn't have any real fears. I try to be as safe as possible and think of, I do things to maintain my safety, but I also don't want to always be thinking of the worst things that could possibly happen. Just try to, live a life where I think of the positives in a way.
Wow. Which is absolutely awesome that you're doing this, and you meet a lot of people along the way too, right? I mean, it looks like, I mean, at being a Facebook stalker, it looks like you're meeting a ton of people. How do you do that? Do you have just an outgoing personality? How does it work?
I typically am an introvert actually, but I feel like once I hit the road, I have an alter ego or something like that because I'll just, a lot of people I met through an app called Couch Surfing. It's where people can host you, and it's just like a very organic way to meet people in the local community you're at. I've met people through Instagram who I knew were into adaptive surfing in San Diego, and so I just messaged them on Instagram and said, "Hey, we should surf together." Or mountain biking. There's all these little adaptive associations that do rentals for equipment and experiences for people with disabilities. So that's how I met a lot of people in this most recent trip, was through the associations. And it's just I don't know, it's just, yeah, I switch into an alter ego where I am very outgoing, and I think I feed off the energy I get when I'm traveling, and people see that and want to be a part of it as well.
Are you now an advocate for travel? Do you tell everybody you come in contact with, like, oh, you need to travel, you need to do this, you need to see this?
I I wouldn't say you need to, but if you're comfortable doing that, I will definitely encourage people to sort of get out of their comfort zone if they haven't done it, or just try and experience new things, because you just don't know what's out there until you go exploring. It's such a neat feeling when you stumble onto something that you hadn't even thought of or heard of. Like on my trip through California, I went paragliding 3 times with um, just an adoptive organization that I stumbled upon, and that, next thing you know, you're flying off a cliff, and it's just a beautiful experience, and you just have to take it all in.
So you've mentioned that you started in wheelchair rugby, you raced wheelchairs, you played basketball, you mentioned mountain biking, surfing, paragliding. I mean, there's a litany of sports. I mean, there's so many different things. You have your own mountain bike, right? So this is what's the
So
name of your mountain bike?
Bashi, I've nicknamed it Bashi, and it's supposed to mean freedom, which is exactly what it does for me. I never pictured being just out in nature on my own, unplugged and away from all the distractions, and that's what the mountain bike does for me. And it's it's such a unique, wonderful thing for me that I want to share that with other people. So I have started a club where I live, where we're trying to collect more of these bikes, and they're such an expensive piece of equipment. The hope is that people, instead of having to go buy their own, can rent it and use it as a loan, and loaner equipment, and then they can go out on their own and experience it. So we're slowly building.
Well, so you have a one-off, right? A one-off mountain bike.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
describe how you ride this bike? Because also you were talking about the racing chair before and not liking the racing chair because it was so difficult to get into the racing chair, whereas
Mhm.
getting into the one-off can be a challenge as well.
Yeah, yeah, it is very much a challenge. I think um, so. It's in a kneeling position. You're basically on your knees, and you have a bit of a chest pad that you can lean on and steer, and then you also have some, they're not handlebars per se, but you have some hand grips that you use to steer. And the trick with this bike is that you have a choice. You're either steering or pedaling. So you can do a bit with your chest, but with my injury level, it is very tough. So you're kind of constantly going back between pedaling to get your momentum and then steering through some of the more technical trails out there. But these bikes are about 10 years old, and then 2 years ago we actually had e-assist put on them. So that has been
Ah.
a a game changer. They're aftermarket and there are a few headaches with it, but just being able to have that assist from a motor has opened up so many possibilities with those bikes.
Well, it's such a challenge because I did a fair amount of it. I actually was the first test pilot for Mike Oxberger, the guy who built the one
Yeah.
off. It was near where I had grown up, and he just called me up because I'd been in our local newspaper.
Yeah.
And he said, "Hey, do you want to try this out?" And I was like, "Yes, this would be so cool because it's an opportunity to get to the woods, which is something when you're in a wheelchair, you think that's it. Like I'm never going to get to the woods again. It's my life is about curb cuts and sidewalks and all of these things. And and I also remember like when you're pedaling, if you're pedaling uphill, there's no coast. Like you pedal uphill, and if you stop, you stop, and you stop immediately. So it is really challenging. I hope this is okay, but you posted recently about an old boyfriend who thought who the relationship ended because he didn't think that you could go along on the adventures with him, the things that he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a part of you that's motivated by something like that?
Huge part of it. I got dumped and I said, okay, well, I'm going to go on this big adventure and I'm going to capture all of it in pictures and videos and I'm going to post it and he's going to eat his words. And so that is how my adventure loving spirit just kind of got going was, yeah, it's like, I'll show you. I know what I can do. I'd never really explored a lot of it at that point, but I'd wanted to. And that was the thing that got me going, really, was just to prove to him and myself that I could still do a lot of those things.
Do you think he knows that you're doing this stuff?
Uh, I have no idea. Probably, because I make a lot of things public that anybody can see. So we'll see. I don't know. Never said anything to me.
And this guy was nicknamed Oompa Loompa,
Yeah,
which makes me think that he would have a more difficult time keeping up with you than vice versa.
it was kind of a play on words, actually. Yeah, no, it was just a funny nickname because in a lot of his pictures, he looked really, really short, and so he had called himself Oompa Loompa at one point because I was asking how tall he was. We'd met online, so.
Which is a perspective thing for those of us sitting in a wheelchair. It's you have an idea when somebody's really short because they're almost eye to eye with you, and when somebody's really tall, but sort of that in between, you lose perspective. You really, how tall are you? And somebody's like, what do you mean, how tall am I? And it's like, I can't really tell. I don't have enough of a perspective. I'm too far away.
Yeah, yeah.
So he started it, but now it sounds like it's your own though. I mean, it sounds like
Yeah.
you're not doing this for him.
No, no. I think he put the idea in my head. I think I'd always had these ideas, but I didn't know where to start. And then I started going on these little micro mini adventures. And then you just start dreaming of the next thing that can come with that. And getting the mountain bike club going and having a bike that I can do these things with just opened up the possibilities for me. And now I'm hooked and I've just got all these ideas going that I want to accomplish and want to try at least. And I think also another huge motivator now for me has been I've been starting to share these adventures with people. I used to have all my Instagram and everything private, but I opened it up and now people have been messaging me saying, "Oh, I have a new spinal cord injury and okay, I see how you do that." And just sharing that and collaborating with them on how they could adapt and do some of these things has been really, really rewarding as well.
You recently posted that you were an open book, right? As far as because it was National Spinal Cord Day. Is that what it was? That they used to,
September was a whole month,
the
right?
whole month, right? Exactly. So you said, ask me anything. What's been sort of the most bizarre question that you've been asked,
Oh,
or the most
geez.
memorable question?
Well, everybody always wants to know, how do you deal with ball and bladder while you're out camping, stuff like that. And I'm pretty open that I had a metrophenol, so I can do a catheterization quite easy wherever and whenever I want. And then just using a washroom whenever whenever I'm near a washroom, I can plan to do my bowel care routine. So that's, I think, what is always on a lot of people's minds. And then how do I do it, the things independently, such as load my vehicle, load my bike, things like that. And it's just all a lot of problem solving and trial and error is what I've come into.
But you can do this all independently. You're like, once you leave, you're on your own, you know what you're doing. And yeah, you've got your bike behind you
Yeah,
in a little trailer.
yeah, I had a specially made bike rack that tilts into a ramp so that I can just roll the bike up and then flatten it out again into a level platform. And I'm just always careful. I do go do a lot of solo riding, but I tell people where I'm going, what trail I'm going on, what time I should be back. And luckily, knock on wood, nothing's ever happened. I didn't have a single mechanical breakdown on my bike at all this last trip. So it's just, yeah, it's been an amazing time.
Wow. That is so cool. Do you have a favorite among the new sports that you've tried?
I would say just mountain biking. It's something that gives you so much freedom, and it's really easy to do because it's not like I'm still so reliant on people through surfing or mono skiing to help me either get into the water or just even help getting me into the mono ski, things like that. So I'm sure I'll get there independently, but even with mountain biking, I can leave right from my home and hit beautiful river trails, or I could drive and just go off into the wilderness and be on my own for however long I want to.
With the e-assist, how fast can you go?
Uh, 45 kilometers an hour, so that's what, 26, 27 miles per hour. But that would be on pavement. I would never do that on a mountain bike trail. They're too rough. But
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. That's, when I used essentially the same kind of thing. I used a four-wheeler when I climbed Kilimanjaro,
right.
and I told people that I was going really fast when I was going 2.5 miles an hour. Like I don't even know what that would be in kilometers, but that would be like, it'd be like four
Yeah,
kilometers,
just
four,
over
four and a
four.
half kind of thing, something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it was, I mean, it's just one of those things that, but it's a totally different deal. Do you listen to music? Do you listen to books? Are you just there?
I'm just there. I do a lot of breath work, sort of meditative mindfulness stuff, like not particularly when I am grinding up a hill or whatever, but when I stop and have those moments, it's just be there and taking the quiet nature in is what I'm all about.
Yeah. Huh. It is a really, I mean, I think it's one of those things that when you're in the hospital, you never think that you'll get there, and you'll never get to that sort of sense of natural peace
Mhm.
and existence. Because sometimes, I mean, I think when you're in the hospital, in some ways, it feels like you might not ever be allowed to be alone again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is this the demonstration for you of independence, of true independence?
I think it is in many, many ways because, yeah, I'm bending my perception or my mind and bending other people's minds of what they think somebody with a disability is doing. Because, yeah, you think, I've had many people just assume that I don't even live on my own. But then I say, no, I take a kayak and I go for a day trip, or I take the mountain bike and I go off and I pack a lunch and I'm gone for the day. And just to see that shift in what they think is possible. And now what I know is possible has been just really, really empowering.
Well, it's also because it's, well, do you live alone? Like, who takes care of you? And then it's, well, can you drive?
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I can drive, but that's the intermediate step to the rest of this world. I'm not sure if I can ask this question, but I'm going to try to make it work anyway. But the independence part of it, it seems like because some of this started with this whole relationship, right?
Mhm.
And 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 now is there a greater fulfillment and sense of identity in terms of who you are and a sense of personal strength as a result?
Absolutely. Yes. Um, just to know know that like I always felt like it would be so great to have that partner that could help me get out and do something like go on a hike or go camping. And now to look back and just in 3 years be like, you know what? I figured out how to do all of that on my own and I'm flourishing with it is just like the biggest confidence booster and like little pat on the back that I could say for myself. Yeah.
So it's like, it's cool if you want to join me now, but I
Yeah,
don't need you to.
exactly. Yeah. It's like, I'll show you how it's done. Like, I've got this figured out. You can come along if you want.
If you want, and please don't slow me down.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything next? Like, what's the next trip, or what's the next excursion, or how do you pick these things? California sounds like, uh, the warm, sunny beaches, a
Yeah.
little different than Saskatchewan winter.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it is weather based, but my two things I have like vision coming up. One is to do like a backcountry camping trip where it's a bike and I packed and I'm doing an overnight somewhere or a kayak somewhere where I'm away for an overnight, away from anything, no vehicle, just in the middle of nowhere. Means of kayak or bike. That'll probably happen next year. And then second is instead of my little SUV named Marty, I'm hoping to get a big full-size van and have a bed, kitchen, fridge, a lift so I can actually get in and be making, meals in the van. And then from there, possibilities just are endless for travel.
It looks like you do okay on the meal side, even in your little Honda.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I think I probably eat better when I'm camping and in the out in nature cooking because it's that much more enjoyable when you're just that's what you're focused on and that's your day is doing an activity and then making supper and going to bed when it's dark versus coming home from work and you got to scrounge something up. I think I do eat pretty well because you got the creative juices going and you just I don't know everything else will taste better after a day out in nature.
It's funny. I always thought that the idea of confidence was about what I could do, and I think my injury in a lot of ways helped me remember that I can sort of handle whatever I run into. That it's like, oh, I can handle whatever comes my way. It sounds like you're signed up on that, where you go on these trips with an idea, but not necessarily an itinerary, and you know just say, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be gone for this amount of time, possibly, or maybe not. And where am I going to go? I have an idea of like the first day, but I don't necessarily have an idea of the second day. I mean, that sounds incredibly liberating. Is that the
It
way it feels?
it is because that is not my day-to-day personality at home. I'm very like being an athlete, you would know you're up at this time, you're training at this time, your life is planned out in 4-year increments. So the first couple of trips that I did, it was an adjustment, but you just have to go back to that, trusting that things will work out and knowing that you're flexible and that you can work around whatever you come along with. Just as an example, on this trip, there was so much smoke from the fires in Washington and Oregon, and I was camping, and just be able to say, okay, I'm not going to go to the location I was going to go to because smoke is worse there. I'm just going to completely do a 180 and I'm going to go over to Vancouver Island where the smoke is less, and just be able to roll with it and figure it out as you go. It just, yeah, it's challenging at start to let go of some of that wanting to control everything. But I've found that those are when like the most organic, natural things come into your life, is when you can just roll with things.
So are you able to leave like the left brain side of you? You know, I mean, you're an engineer, right? I mean, this is like the left brain. I mean, is a left brain, right brain kind of thing where you're like, okay, I'm able to leave that and now indulge in this more intuitive side of, you know, leave the analytical, go to the intuitive side. Is it how, why, what, you know, what's the end result?
It just comes because you're, for me, when I'm on the road and I'm traveling, all I need is food in my belly and a place to sleep at night. And so though when you take all of the distractions away and that's all you have to think about, they're pretty easy things to figure out. And so that's all you can focus on, and having some fun in there, throw some fun in there, and it's just the easy recipe, and you come up with an end result quite quickly.
Do you still have to get Wi-Fi? I mean, I'm imagining you're still working as you're on these trips or not.
No, I'm not. I'm temporarily laid off with COVID right now. So uh, that, and you know, on this trip, I haven't needed to have Wi-Fi except to touch base with family and friends. But the ideal situation would be that I could work remotely and have micro adventures and work a little bit in the day, and then you know do a lot of it remotely.
It sounds like you've figured you've figured it out. Do you feel like you've figured it out? Like this is how to be happy in life?
I do. I feel like there's just like so many distractions out there, but when you can just break it down to what makes you happy. And for me, like I said at the start, it's being outdoors and it's being active. And it's just when you can look at those things and say, okay, how do I make those happen? And I've figured out a solution to that. And I know what direction to go and I know what's stopping me right now. And so I just have to adjust and work around those things.
That is awesome. I think that a lot of the people who are listening are going, okay, I'm going to have to look at my life a little bit differently now. I think you definitely have changed some minds out there. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for doing what you do, you know, for going out there and demonstrating to us that life passes us quickly and we better have some fun along the way.
Yeah, that's so very, very true.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me. It's been great catching up.
It has been great catching up. We did run into each other back in San Diego when you were in the midst of one of your travels, and I sort of flew in and flew out and at an event, but really cool. So thank you all for joining us. This has been an awesome episode of the Nametags Chat podcast. Per usual, you can go to the One Revolution page on Facebook to check it out if you want to watch it. If you only saw part of it, if you want to tell your friends, please tell your friends. It will be posted to the One Revolution channel on YouTube as well. And we will have, I'm not sure who we have next week. We're still working on that, but we will have another exciting adventure next week. I don't know if it can top this. This is going to be a big challenge for the next guest.
I might have some ideas for you then.
All right, sounds good. I'm open to these ideas. Lisa, thanks a ton, and look forward to seeing you on one of these adventures sometime soon.
All right. Thanks, Chris.